Cloud, I understood. Cool. Well, hello, SIG Network. Today is February 1st, and it's nice and sunny over here. As you all know, we are a CNCF project and abide by those rules, which boils down to just don't be a jerk. We do have a few items on the agenda. The first up is triage. Admittedly, I have not prepared for triage. Does anybody have a hot GitHub issue? Oh, Tim has one.
I have the triage window up if we want to run through it. We actually have been accumulating untriaged issues to the extent that we have 2 pages worth right now, and it's not a happy state. So I would appreciate if we can run through it. I didn't actually look at the agenda. I don't know how much else we have today, but I would like to emphasize to folks who are assigned issues, please, please, please go look at them, ferret out whether they're real or not. If they're not, it's okay to close them. If they're dead and nobody's responding to them, it's okay to close them or ask them to be closed. You don't have to go fix the bugs. You just have to try to confirm whether it's a real bug and we have enough information to act on it. Right now, I think we've got 45 or something open, and that's not a happy place. So that said, I'll share and we can take a look at it.
It looks like we have about 25 minutes of other things on the agenda, so we have some time to knock out a few of these.
Awesome. So I loaded it up. I went through a few, but I didn't have time to go through the whole list. So let's take a quick look. Kube proxy health check all 0 listening. I read this over. Lars, I don't know if you're here. If you have a summary of it, I didn't click through to this link yet. And Dan says, ugh, it's fixed in NF tables. Does somebody have a context?
Yeah, if you have a dual stack cluster and you specify node port addresses for only one family, then people might assume that means don't listen on the other family, but actually it means listen on all addresses on the other family.
Oh.
And fixing that might be a, compatibility break.
Indeed, it sounds like it would be, although it definitely feels like a bug.
Hence the UG.
Yeah. Is that logic in the proxy mode specifically, or is it in kube proxies like generic logic?
It's in the generic thing, but because in NF tables, we now default to only listening on a single IP rather than all IPs, it sort of bypasses the bad logic.
Can you, sorry, I either wasn't aware or forgot that we're only listening on one IP. How does that change?
So in NF tables mode, it only listens for node port connections on the primary node IP or IPs for dual stack.
Oh, this is for node port, not for its own health Z. Got it. Got it. Sorry, I was thinking it. I saw the title of kube proxy health check, and I thought it was the proxy's own health check.
Oh, yeah, no.
Is that health check node port?
Health check. Okay. Okay. So in NF tables, we only listen on the configured ports or configured IPs. And in IP tables, we just fall through to all ports or all IPs. Yuck.
This was discussed like 1 year ago or something.
There was discussion at one point that we could start warning people that they ought to specify node port addresses, or that we ought to allow node port addresses dash primary, something like that, and then start warning people if they don't specify that.
The bug here is that the health check node port is listening in the other family, right?
The bug is that if you don't specify a restriction for both families, then you get listens on all interfaces for one family.
Because it'll just fall off the bottom of the list, right? And start matching node ports.
No, the default is listening to all ports. And if you listen to all ports on IPv6, it automatically includes all IPv4 ports in Linux, but not in Windows.
Or all IPs, you mean, right?
You have colon in IPv6, you automatically get all IPv4 addresses.
Cool. Thanks, Linux. And in the reason we're not actually listening on health check node ports though, right? We fall through at the bottom of the IP tables rules in IP tables mode, which I know best. We say, well, it didn't match any service IP, so let's go match against node ports, and we don't check IPs there if you don't specify a restriction, right? We just leave that criteria empty.
Right. This is about what set of rules we output. So,
Right.
because, if you had specified an IPv6 node port address, we wouldn't have the fall through rule.
Yeah, but
That's right.
Just to be clear, this is the health check node port, not the node port, or is both?
Well, it's both.
It's
The
both,
health check
yeah.
node port is a node port.
They
but-
both
but-
use
but-
the same logic.
Okay, but one thing, the bug talks about the listener. The listener is only the health check node port. We don't have any node port listener.
The health check node ports and node ports use the same logic. This bug applies to both of them. The
Okay.
reporter is only talking about the health check node ports, but
Okay, now I understand. And this is tied to the bug that you open, like one that Lars is linking there. Okay.
Right. We do listen. We actually listen, syscall listen on node port, health check node ports because we have our own HTTP handler there. That's right. That's where the Linux behavior kicks in. Okay. Cool. Do we fix this?
In my opinion, there is no way to say that I don't want to listen to any ports. And that might be a bug in one family. But the workaround is very simple, as you see in the top of the screen. It's just to include the loopback address, and you don't expose any external ports at all.
There is one way. You specify the syscall, so you can say TCP4 or TCP6. And I remember somebody did appear about that. So
Yeah.
beside this 00, you can say TCP4 only. Or maybe I'm wrong, but I think that I'm right. I need to check it. But I think that you can say this socket is TCP4 only or TCP6.
Okay.
only.
So this issue is currently unassigned. Does somebody want to take it and summarize this and make a suggestion for moving forward?
yeah, you can assign it to me.
Sorry, is that Dan?
Yes.
Thank you. We have some E2E tests when we drop cloud providers. I haven't looked at this very closely, but there's a long list of tests that affect us that will be dropped when we move to provider list testing. I have not followed this thread, but I presume that means that all of these tests will no longer be running at all unless individual cloud providers choose to run them. Is that the right interpretation? Anybody? All right, I'll follow up on this myself then, because that's scary.
So, wait, Antonio, were you?
Sorry, I had to. I almost lost my luggage for. Tell me, I was so.
This is the provider list test that will be dropped with provider list. Does that mean that we need to go set up a separate like CI for the Google Cloud provider and the AWS provider and the Azure provider?
Well, each cloud provider has to solve their problem. I think that Azure is already doing.
Yeah. So like
Google
the AI here is we need to figure out, we Google, we AWS each need to figure out where do we want to run these tests for ourselves.
And then is the agnostic ones, that is the kind cloud provider that's on my plate too.
Okay, so these tests will run against kind, but these specific ones that run, like the Google Ingress Balancer, that's on Google to run, which makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Okay, Bowie, have you?
It's not on me. Yeah.
Bowie, are you still here? I saw you on there earlier.
Yep, I'm here.
Have we put any thought into how we want to do this? Do you know?
I have to sync up with Antonio.
Okay. It's not just networking, of course, right? We like it's
Yeah,
the whole GPU together.
storage, and it's off.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna tag you on here also, Bowie. And we should figure out who on the GKE side maybe wants to help out with this. I would suggest, I don't know if anybody from AWS is here today. We would want to tag on this specifically. No? All right, well, I'll do some follow-up, just make sure people are paying attention to this. Moving on. We have a flaky test in GCE master scale correctness. Well, won't matter soon.
Yeah, those are. Last time there were infra. Okay, I couldn't check these things for 2 weeks, so all things assigned to me are piling up.
Okay. Well, this one's assigned to you. If you want to assign it to somebody else, please do. Or close out.
99% of the time it's infra issues, so I just need to validate that's not the same. And with the previous one, this is not going to be a problem of Kubernetes.
That's right. That's right. It won't matter anymore. We've got a test assigned to Zappa around Windows. Just pinging you, Zappa.
Still following up on this one.
Cool. Next up, ports with duplicate names should not be allowed to exist in the pod. Cool. Yet another place where the handwritten validation fails to capture the intention.
There is work about this a lot. I mean, there are PRs adding warnings and documenting this, right?
Yes. I haven't looked at the PRs yet because I've been focused on KEPs. Once the KEP window closes, I'll shift to PRs. This is on me. I probably wrote the bug, so I assigned it to myself.
I think that Jordan linked it. I remember to review 2 PRs about this.
Yeah, I remember my mailbox is filled with PRs right now.
Okay, so then it's for you.
Yep. Also, server-side apply. This is assigned to me, so we can just move on. Enable service links to false by default. There's actually a PR open for this to add an admission controller.
That's and I was reviewing that PR. So the thing is, the problem statement is: are we able to be smart enough to know if it's default by the API server or if it's set by the user? If we can achieve that with any of these tricks, we can have a very decent solution to the problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was in my backlog of, can we go look at the managed fields? So I see that there's some updates here that say maybe not.
I was checking that, and that's why I commented there. And Jordan suggested something. So no, it's a funny thing to explore.
It is sort of a gap in the API serving. Another option would be that we would move the defaulting out of the static defaults and move it into the REST-based defaults, and then we would know if it's empty and change it to a pointer, right?
Yeah, but anyway, how did you do that without the long tail of things that may depend on that?
Yeah, right. Okay, so I assigned this to myself just to follow up and look at the PRs. Moving on, we have another flake coming from November. No update since November?
Yeah, that's the same thing as all these conformance.
Do we need to keep it open? It's hard to tell whether to keep another one open or if it's the same issue.
Assigned to me, I will next week. I'm going to do cleanup on everything assigned to me, and
you got it. Endpoints and endpoint slices with addresses with different conditions. We have talked about this one in the past. The good news is we're back into October. The bad news is it's still open. We've talked about this in the past, but I don't know if we ever came to any conclusion here.
I don't remember honestly. I think that we concluded something, but if nobody remembers now, is that it was a soft conclusion.
Rob, are you here? Do you remember anything about this?
Rob is he's out this week.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I will unstale it. We do need to circle back to this. I'm going to assign Rob just because he's not here. Okay, next. Configure old topology aware routing. I know Rob and Gaurav are looking at retooling the topology stuff. They've revised the KEPs there. So I'm going to leave this open for now, but it may end up getting resolved through that KEP process, which we can talk about separately. Moving on, requests to a service with no local endpoints are dropped rather than ICMP rejected. I remember this, Dan, yes. Should we have a categorical, like, this is when you should reject, this is when you should drop decision? Or is it okay that it's different per proxy?
Well, I was very vocal about always send signal, but we don't have any decision. We are just swimming with the current.
Yes.
Sounds like we came to a decision and then forgot to do anything about it.
Uh-huh. What should we do about it? Write it down, put it in your service proxy doc?
The service proxy doc already documents the behavior that IP tables implements.
Which is this, right? Can you link to the service proxy doc and we can just close this one then?
Is that what we? Sure.
No, but the question is this open for discussion or are we going to settle on this?
Yeah, we left it with an open question. It's unclear. Dan, you made some comment earlier in the thread about whether upstream load balancers would react badly to a reject.
Yeah, I can reread through this and try to re-summarize, and we can revisit when there's a summary of what's left undecided.
Fair. Okay, I tagged you on it. Thank you. How are we for time? All right, I'll do one more. Oh, maybe let's skip this one.
This is the one that created the other one that you can have the same IP in two different places.
Yeah.
I need to clean up the background. Actually, I have a presentation today to talk about this.
Okay, cool. I'll reread this one too. I'll stop here and I'll turn the floor back over. And then if we have time, we can do more.
The next agenda item was actually KEPs for 1:30.
Oh, I can share that also. Give me 1 second. Pull this off. And then share again. Okay, so I went through and I looked at the dashboard and here's, I believe, our current state. People, please tell me if I'm wrong. The IP mode is probably not moving forward. That's the only one I need to circle back to because I think I got an email today. K&I is not moving forward for 30, right? Multi-service cider, Antonio,
Nah.
that's not
I-
moving for 30?
I'm not confident on having this.
So no change in 30. The various kube proxy stuff is moving forward. That health checking stuff is moving forward to 1 to beta and 1 to GA in 30. We are moving NF tables, no change in 30. Dan, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Kube proxy version field deprecation moves to beta, and that skipping this release moves to beta in 31. Host IPs is GA in 30. I don't think the code was merged for that yet, but the KEP was merged. This was, I just mentioned, node IP handling. This is moving to GA in 30. Again, I don't think I've seen a PR for the code, but I could be wrong.
No, the KEP is waiting for PRR review.
Okay, that'll happen this week. Topology stuff is not changing. There's a new KEP to describe some new semantics, and I don't remember if I added that one here. I'll have to go figure out if I added that one. My bad. Node port ranges, that's slated to be cleaned up in 31. And then there's the relaxed DNS search string, which is, I believe, is still trying to get in for 30, but I have to go check the KEP.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
And it seems okay to me, and you seem okay with it with the reduced scope. Is that right, Dan?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. At the end, it's solid with the underscore, right?
It's only adding underscore and only for a single API field, DNS config searches.
Okay. Are there any others that I missed other than the new topology one?
What is the time limit for 130? Is it next week only?
Tomorrow for PRR. You're supposed to be in with PRR assigned by tomorrow, and then PRR's got a week.
So never mind.
Oh, sorry. I want to see if I can find it. This is not an org member. Oops, go. There we go. So there is this new KEP that's open. If people want to take a look at it, Gaurav is retooling the way topology or routing preference is described. It's an interesting KEP, but it will at best be alpha in this release. Actually, yeah, he wants to target alpha in this release. Let's put it in SIG network KEPs. And cool. All right, that's it for KEPs, I think, unless I'm missing any. Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. Next item is Patrick, CNI lifecycle events. I'll give the floor to him.
Yes, thank you. I'll try to share here. Seems that host disabled attendee screen sharing. Okay. Well, then there's no screen sharing in that case. Yeah. Okay. So screen sharing doesn't.
Yeah, if you want to share, we can give you co-host.
Yep, that would be nice.
Sorry, I'm not host. Zappa, can you do that?
I am unable to do that too. I think Shane has to do it.
Shane, I don't know if you're listening.
Yeah, I'm listening. But what do I have to do?
Give
I missed that part.
Patrick a co-host.
Patrick,
you can't do that? Okay. Sorry. FLYKT?
Yes.
Here you go. Sorry about that. You should be all set.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how this works. Okay, I'm sharing something apparently. Can you see something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Got it.
Great. Okay, so hi, I'm Patrick Flykt from Intel, the same team as Sasha, Christian, Markus, and whomever from Intel is around in this meeting, in the same office actually. And what we have been up to, like last autumn, was to figure out CNI lifecycle events for NRI, so that while we have the container and pod lifecycle events, now we could extend that to CNI things as well. So what we came up with is like 3 different points in time where something happens. The first and the pretty low level one is the runtime. When the runtime config file changes, in that generates an event. Actually, we can detect that the file changed, and then we can go pick it up. From there, we can generate a network configuration changed event. Should anybody actually want to do something at this point, this means that this the configuration file has been modified somehow. We pick it up, or actually when the whole thing starts, it's read the first time. So here we could do some kind of policy control if we want to. Then, of course, nothing happens for a long time until there is a need to set up a pod. And when that happens, we, of course, do need a pod network. And before we call the CNI setup machinery, here we plugged in a pre-setup network call. And after the CNI setup has been completed, according at least for the CNI plugins or plugin or whatever, then we have a post-setup network control point that can be invoked, so that everybody who wanted to do something or react to something now is updated on what has been going on. Then, of course, the containers run as long as they run, pretty long time sometimes. And then we go to the situation where everything wants to be removed. So again, here again, before the CNI removal is called, then there is a pre-network deleted point, and which actually has where actually we sit and wait for the NRI plugins to actually react to something, return back, and once all the plugins have been called in order, the CNI networking is removed. After that happens, there is just a signal sent that now the namespace, network namespace, actually went away. So they can be informed and release resources at that point if needed. So how this looks like, yeah, as I said, this is the low-level thing. It actually ends up in the Go CNI package. In case of containerd, it's pretty low level. Here we kept it so that the NRI plugin or plugins, they get the CNI configs as a string. It's still the same formatting applied to the individual as the individual files have. They can look at it, figure out that this is a good thing or not, and if needed, they could actually update those config files. The result that comes back, that's stored just in runtime memory and not written back to disk in order to avoid loops and to keep everything under control, so that there is no artifact staying behind when something gets restarted eventually. So the more interesting part is the pre and post setup network things. Since they get activated before and after a CNI pod network is created. Here, the idea, now let's remember that for NRI, there can be multiple plugins that all want to listen to the same signal, and they actually are called in order, in the same order in each case. That means that there can be more than one thing acting as a policy on the network setup. signals. So here the thing was that that we thought that when we send a pre-set up network message, there we had the CNI configs, as many as the runtime knows of. They are sent over to the plugins. The plugins can figure out if they want to add some capabilities, which actually end up being more or less a map of a string to something that looks like an empty interface in Go, so that you could send over capabilities, much like the things that actually are going to be shuffled down to the CNI library inside containerd, so that one doesn't need to have this kind of string mapping, because that's pretty flat. So instead there can be more structure. But this, of course, can cause some interesting issues of what's going to come that way. And then, there was some simple map string arguments, which actually would mimic some networking arguments. I'm not sure if that was a very good idea, but let's see. Okay, after this, I mean, this means that the plugins can shuffle in arguments, so that when the CNI configuration is run, they actually their behavior can be modified based on policy. This means that it's like on-the-fly runtime policy, and not something that it's actually only coming from the config files on disk. After the CNI library has done its thing, then there is this post-setup network message that actually mimics at the moment the CNI result structure. So it actually has interfaces, IPs, routes, and DNS information much the same way as the result structure from the CNI library. So this means that then the NRI plugins can all look at what actually happened, and if they want to do something, shuffle order in the IP addresses, or add some information, then that's completely doable at this point. So for the pre and post network deleted things, there's not. Yes, and actually all the messages, they were identified by the pod sandbox, which is there already from earlier times. So then that's just to inform that whose network is being deleted, and actually the post network deleted is just a signal, so it just signals everybody in one go that the network now actually went down. Here the idea is that before, if there was something set up on behalf of the NRI plugins when the network was created, now is the last time to remove that from the network namespace if there needs to be something removed or changed. Otherwise,
can I pause for a second and
Yes.
ask a question? I have a suspicion that not everybody here is familiar with NRI. Can you maybe do like a 30-second pitch of what is NRI and what are the problems that we're solving with this design?
Okay, so with NRI, we get actually can apply policies to the pod lifecycle and the container lifecycle. So before the pod is being created, there is signaling to NRI. NRI has plugins which it can call. Those who are interested in the signal can then apply. Can get notified about events. Then, of course, the pod gets created. When containers get created, there is again a set of signals where you can actually, as a reply, you can send some important information back to the runtime, which can apply it to apply to certain containers. For example, one can figure out which sets of CPUs are the best to run the containers on, and actually restrain memory set up memory amount of memory aside for containers and whatnot. So it's basically a runtime policy enforcement mechanism for otherwise a pretty static configuration.
Small correction. It's
Yes.
runtime extension mechanism. So policy is one of the biggest usage cases, but there are several other scenarios, like for like logging or for like low-level manipulating of OCI spec if needed. One example, Samuel Karp and his team were using it for injecting or modifying the R limits or U limits or inside the OCI spec. So it's kind of like low-level tooling on runtime side on OCI level.
Yes, so that is pretty nice. So from a networking point of view, what we could do with this, we could, for example, add bandwidth parameters for some networks. So before the network is created, we send back bandwidth parameters that are as the same structure as would be sent over to the CNI setup mechanism. That's one thing. We could adjust workload CPUs, how they are selected or bound to which CPUs based on which network hardware we happen to have. We could adjust the order of IP addresses after the CNI has done its thing, reorder them, for example, so that the default IP address could be changed or something else. What we can one could figure out around CNI. So then it starts to become a bit more interesting because if we go from a bit bottom up, yes, when the NRI plugin starts, it might have started actually after something had already happened. So yes, we do need a sync mechanism at startup. The NRI already contains this kind of synchronization mechanism in its existing calls, which has to do with the pod and container life cycles. So yes, the networking part would need one as well. Now, actually, yes.
For the sake of time, I think we need to bring this to an end.
Yes,
can you tie it off?
I can pretty quickly hang off. Yes. Okay. So the thing that where the biggest issue perhaps at the moment is that the messages and arguments, they are borrowed from current CNI data structures. They're not probably the best ones around. We also know that KNI popped up, and from there, the thing is that who owns the network configuration actually in this kind of an RPC mechanism. One existing thing at the moment is already like Cilium, which thinks that it owns its configuration, is pretty defensive about that one. So yeah, this actually works, but is heavily leaned towards the current existing CNI at the moment. And here the thing is that we would perhaps, with KNI in mind, we perhaps would need to standardize, agree on a set of messages so that it gets so that the networking new modern networking RPC mechanism actually has the same set of messages to figure out on. And yeah, that's the thing. The code is there in a pull request and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have a few items on agenda, so if folks have questions, maybe we can bring them to the mailing list.
Yep.
Antonio, you're next on the agenda.
Can I share?
Shane will have to give him co-host.
I'm on it.
Or can you share on
I'm on it. Hang on. Just can't see you in the list right now for some reason.
Oh, because no.
I see you now. There you go.
Allow. Okay, this is super confusing now. Share the screen, right? Chrome tab. Okay. Let I show. So now you're seeing.
Yep.
Okay. Because I don't see, so I trust you that you're seeing what I see. So this is because I sent this to the SIG leads or leads mailing lists internally. But since we are having more and more discussions with multi-network, with a lot of features, with everything, I just want to write this here. This came because there was a feature that merged that you enable beta features in Kubernetes and it broke the cluster. Literally, the cluster didn't work. So it took like several weeks, Paco Shu and other people and I and people from Node to understand what was the problem. The feature was failing during one or two releases. I don't remember. Let's say one release. And finally, like 2 weeks ago, we decided to move it back to alpha. So that means that we added a feature, nobody worked on it. It was failing the cluster during 2 or 3 releases. There was issues pointing that out, and the result is the cluster that didn't work. When I'm raising this is because we are adding a lot of features. We are adding a lot of features. We are not graduating that. So when you commit to add a feature, you need to think that you need to commit to move the feature along with the purpose of making it GA and making it sustainable, right? So we cannot keep a lot of features in alpha or in beta and never graduate. We have the Ingrid example, right? Then what is the consequence? So this is Jordan was doing an analysis of the bugs and regressions, and you can see that in 123, 124, 125, everything is really good, green, right? And now we since that we are still moving back to 190, 120, 121, 122, where we had a lot of regressions, and this correlates with the number of features that we have, right? We have more features, we are not graduating, and most probably this is causing instability on Kubernetes. Another thing that was pretty clear today during the triage, right, is I didn't spend time during these last 2 weeks on checking issues, and it's a good example. We don't have many people looking at issues or working on the problems. As a result, we have more issues open and fewer less closed. That means that the diff is net positive, so we are accumulating open issues. Maybe these are issues open in GitHub, right? Maybe they are harmless or they are not. It's just throwing facts with trends, right? So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to contribute, is helping with the issues to get it close to driving to a resolution is a good place to do it. And this can, there's a question.
So the previous graph showed us as well that we have a lot less issues as well, right? Like compared to previous times, even like 2020, we have like 4 times less issues.
Yeah, we have less issues, but I don't want to pick on stats, right? Stats are easy to manipulate and to get conclusions. I think that what was clear in the triage today is that there are only few people working on issues, right? And if these few people don't work on issues, they are never closed. That's my conclusion, and I think that's a fact, right? Despite
Also,
they are more.
this graph isn't the cumulative. Those 2 lines are rates. So when they're about the same, like pick 2020, middle of 2020, they're about the same. They occasionally trade who's above. The number of open issues in the Kubernetes project stays stable, right? Now we're seeing less issues opened, but also even less issues closed. So the rate, like Antonio said, we're accumulating, even at a lower rate than a few years ago, which is to be expected as the project matures, but we have more, I don't know if you're getting static, I'm sorry. We're getting more issues in than we're getting issues out.
Let me, these are the stats. I don't want to, it's just, I don't want to nitpick on the stats, but So we have different problems, right? We have you saw all these flaky tests, all these CI failure, all these things. This is a lot of work. I mean, this is a lot of work and requires a lot of knowledge. Any of you that try to set up a job, you know how difficult it is, right? You need to go to test infra, you need to know what this pro thing is doing, you need to do all these things, right? And that's time. And time is scarce. Okay, we have a lot of other problems, right? Technical debt. You saw this one of we enable these service link things. Why are we enabling service link things? Okay, well, this technical debt that is there, right? And we have also this now all this CNI KNI discussion, right? And you go there and you see, oh, what is doing the curate? The curate is doing these things that shouldn't be doing. So we need to fix all those things too before moving forward, right? And we have a lot of these things, right? Okay, now this is the big new thing. Let's put everything here and brainstorm a lot of new APIs, a lot of new things. But once the wave passes, there are like 3-4 people that are going to have to deal with all these shenanigans of this problem. And the other thing is, we are SIG network, but Kubernetes SIG network is not kubeproxy. Neither SIG node is kubelet, neither API machinery is kube API server. Everybody has an ownership in a component, but everybody has a responsibility on their domain, right? All the client go TCP stuff is a SIG network problem. All the DNS configuration in the pods is a SIG network problem. So we shouldn't try to create boundaries and bounds issues. Kubernetes distributed system network is in the middle. We are in the middle of everything. So everything that we touch or we design has a lot of consequences. But we cannot say, okay, Kubernetes is done. Well, it's never going to be finished, as Tim said in the keynote. But I mean, we need to add new features, right? And we need to evolve and adapt to the new technical challenges that are happening. But for doing that, we need to get a strong use case, right? We need to try to avoid to implement things that are overcomplicated just to solve minor things. And try to avoid, so we have the feature gates and we have all these things. Try to avoid to do risky experiment, right? If we are not sure, just to try to gate well the component, to be sure how much time can I commit to that, and if I don't have time, just to be conscious and say, well, I'm not going to work in this feature, so I'm going to keep it in alpha so that I don't risk the rest of the project. Solutions. I want to. I mean, there are now a great work, and I want to shout out Dan Winship and Lars and Aurora. I mean, all the work that they are doing in kubeproxy. I mean, it's impressive. They are adding new libraries for discovering new things, adding new metrics. And I think that's what we need to do is start with something small, start to create a community and start to do incremental changes. And people this way can get into the project and can take on bigger things, right? And then we need to be conscious of how much we can do, right? We are a small group with complex things, and we need to deal with all the things. So we need to be strategic on what we pick and invest a lot in automation and engineering excellence. As I want to deploy something, this has to be super well tested, so nobody has to spend more time on fixing this or to try to be sure if this is buggy or not. And as I say, this is from Valencia Contributor Summit. Is we need to understand that Kubernetes is not. There is a common misunderstanding in people that come from traditional development that there is SIG testing that do QA, so people do features. There is a QA, and then there is a release. This is not how Kubernetes works. It's the SIG, the feature owner owns everything, owns the testing, owns the bugs, and owns the code, and owns the capacity, the responsibility to hand over to the rest of the project and to keep it stable, right? So when you want to create a feature, you need to understand that you need to make incremental changes to see progress, to see that everything is well tested, that all assumptions are verified. And that's it. I mean, you have some reference, and I want just think about this: is we are. It may people may think that there are a lot of contributors in Kubernetes, but the reality is that the project is maintained only for a few people. You need to think that there is a lot of technical debt. Just go to the PR of team that has like 200 commits just to fix everything, how everything is generated. So that's the core of the project, and that I don't know how many hours are you spending on that thing.
Hundreds,
Months.
hundreds
Right.
of hours.
So that's what I'm saying is hundreds, and it's okay. Well, that's it.
Does it mean that SIG network or maybe Kubernetes doesn't have like a, let's call it a checklist of what do I need to do to add a feature to Kubernetes? And this is something that we need to define. I'm not sure whether that's already there or not.
So the thing is, we are like take it more as we are like a family, and in this family everybody knows more or less, what is the feeling of how this
No,
is going
but
to
that
start
doesn't
to work.
work, Antonio. Family, I know that you cannot treat it as family. You will have a new company coming in that they would want to add features, and they will not be able to because they are new and they won't be right away family, right, for you. So that's not the way to go. There has to be, I think, we have to be more explicit around that one. Where we say if you wish to add a feature, you have to add A, B, C, D, and then beyond that you have to do XYZ because this feature has to be then maintainable by someone else, right? So documentation, fully fledged testing, what's not. Do we have that defined? Because I know I'm hearing that from you from multi-networking, but this is just between us. But that looks like, are we missing something like that, like on a project or at least SIG network level?
We have the caps and the PRR. That's the project came identify this problem. Like we have the cap and the PRR. But what I'm trying to point out is, look, this is how it works. This is open source. There is no commitment from anybody to say this is how it's going to work. So
It is, right? Because there are people that wants to add features, and those are the committed people, right? Like we had today, Patrick want to add a new feature. He will be fully committed and kind of try to follow the rules to add a feature, like same me, right? That's why, but maybe that answers the question. Is KEP the thing that defines all those kind of has the checklist to do that? Is that what it is, or it's not sufficient? Because that sounds like it is not sufficient. People don't follow that because you said we have a bunch of flags, and we still run into issues with the maintainability and all that. How do we address that then?
Mike has, I don't want to hijack the conversation. Mike have a conversation, the hands up, and it's 2 minutes. I think that we can put as an starting for the next meeting because you are raising very good points.
Yeah, I think I was trying to get to the root cause of like, is the KEP process insufficient? Do we require explicit items in the KEP to move things forward? Because I know the KEP process was implemented because people were using Kubernetes as a dumping ground for their features, and then they are running away and never coming back and supporting core Kubernetes. And I think maybe one of the points that Maciej is trying to raise was maybe, and Maciej, you can totally tell me I'm 100% wrong, was, without like clear expectations lined out, the problem comes down to a moving goalpost situation where if they're not, if everybody hits this checklist, but then it's also, well, you also have to do X, Y, and Z. I think maybe there's like some areas that we can improve in the KEP process to ensure that, things do move forward, but we also don't want to have the issue where people implement something, then leave, and then it's broken, and now we have to come in and implement it or fix
So,
it. Tim, go for it.
Can you guys hear me, or am I still a robot?
Nope, you're here.
Okay. The KEP process is flawed. It is an evolutionary process. It was originally created share information among people who are overly busy, and to, you know, structure that information in a way that we could get the most commonly needed questions answered across project elders. PRR came along because it turns out we don't like to ask the really hard questions, and so PRR encodes that. It's not perfect. People still do drive-by features, and they throw it in our yard and drive away. That's a mess. Ultimately, we have a web of trust. We have sort of the people who've been around the longest, who have the most authority, who trust a next level of people, and they trust the next level of people. And there's some amount of sort of social capital that you earn by showing up and working on the project. That said, we're at time, but I really wanted to give Gaurav a minute to just talk about his KEP if we can. Gaurav, are you here?
Yeah, I am. Hey.
Can you do like a 2-minute quick summary?
Yes, I can do that. So I think the KEP is mostly focused on rewrite of what we have right now, which is for topology-aware routing. Just a quick recap of people who are not familiar or with topology-aware routing. The idea is, right now we have an annotation which allows you to set a field called auto. What that gives users is the ability to say, I want to say my traffic from a zone should only get routed within that zone. We don't offer a guarantee that it will always be the case, and there have been certain situations or issues raised by users that the behavior is slightly less predictable for them, or they don't know how it's working. So the main idea with the new KEP is that we would like to introduce additional values than auto, and I guess the right way to do that, as per suggestion, was to have a new field with some dedicated values. And yeah, I really appreciate if the community can take a look at the KEP, provide some feedback. I'm hoping we can get this in as alpha for 130. The freeze is next week, so any timely feedback is appreciated.
Yeah, I will echo that. It needs eyeballs. This is our 3rd or 4th attempt at trying to get an API here that balances the needs of users and the needs of implementations. So anybody who's interested in this topic, please go look at KEP. What is it, 4442?
4444. It's a simple number.
4444.
Yeah.
All right. Zappa, you want to tie it off?
Yeah, just that.
I don't know if he's still here. I can't control the recording, but I guess I can. I'm going to stop the recording now. The meeting is over.
Sorry, I was like trying to unmute and mute. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I can go ahead and stop the recording unless you already just did. But I'll go ahead.